Hi, I'm Tori, and I just saw the Mortal Engines movie. I was really excited about this movie because I read the first book in the series, and I really loved the idea of the book and the overall aesthetic, but I had quite a few kind of problems with the book. I will link my review of it in the description. And so I was really excited to see the movie and to see kind of how they adapted it and what things they changed. And I was actually really pleased with it. There were a few things I didn't like, but mostly I think the movie is a big improvement on the book. And I think that they did a really nice job saving the best things from the book and then adjusting some things that really needed some work. So I'm going to start talking about the things in this movie that I really like and the changes that I definitely approve of. So if you want to read the book or go see the movie, go do that and then come back and you can listen to me compare them. So first of all, I think this story is one that really lends itself to a film adaptation very well, because the whole premise is that you have these giant rolling cities with all their spectacular steampunk cogs and wheels and all this machinery. And the book, that was really impressive in the book, but it was the kind of thing that was just so gorgeous on film. And I loved getting to see the cities and getting to see the people running around. And the movie did such a good job of showing the scale, of showing the people down inside the tiny little tracks that the treads in the cities made, and then zooming out and seeing how huge the cities were in comparison. And I thought it had such a good grasp of scale, and it was so great to see the giant cities. You'd see those shots of the pretty gardens and then kind of zoom out and just kind of see the whole city that they were sitting in. And that was just so beautiful and so well done. I also thought the movie made the action scenes much more suspenseful, especially the opening chase scene. In the book, the point of that scene was kind of to establish that the predator cities eat the smaller cities, and it's kind of inevitable, and there's nowhere for the small cities to go. But it was done in such a way that you knew that the bigger city was going to capture the little city. And because you were just kind of watching from Tom's perspective, while he's up on the balcony, you don't see as much of the chase. In the movie, you got to see like this big climactic chase scene and the little town trying to dart away as fast as it could and like almost falling over that cliff, and the big city just working really hard to chase after it. And I thought that scene was so much more engaging than it was in the book. So I think my favorite change they made in the movie is just a small one. But in the books, when the predator cities were hunting the smaller towns, you always got the feeling that they were like looking for metal and getting parts to make their cities. And in the movies, they're looking for fuel, which just services the plot so much better. In the books, I was really confused by everyone's perceived lack of resources when they had all the food they could eat grown from algae and they had all the power they could want. They only mentioned fuel once in an offhand way, and it was basically just that they were moving above their sustainable level, and if they stayed at that sustainable level, then they would always have enough fuel and they wouldn't need more. And it was so much more engaging in the movie to have them using the smaller cities for fuel, because fuel is definitely the kind of resource that it seems like you would run out of much more quickly than parts to repair your cogs and wheels. So I thought that was such an amazing change, and it made the whole world feel so much more realistic and grounded, and like it could actually happen, and like these circumstances were real and something the characters were actually having to deal with. I also thought it was an interesting change that the old tech in the movie was much more functional and much more usable. In the book, basically, it seemed like they had found computers and things, and they were like, okay, they're these plastic things that used to do something. We have no idea how they worked. And in the movie, it seemed like they were much more viable, and people were much closer to figuring out how the weapons had worked during the 60 Minutes war. The movie did also throw in some kind of jokes poking fun at our society. The book, it was kind of more distanced, and the movie threw in, it had the little statues of minions that were the gods of old, and it had a couple little jokes about how people spend too much time staring at their screens and stuff. I'm not sure how well those jokes will age, but I'm guessing that this movie wasn't really designed to be treasured 30 or 40 years from now, so that probably won't matter too much. Another change that I really loved was that the movie made Hester the main character instead of Tom. The movie opens from her perspective. You see her trying to get on board the city, and she is a much more interesting character to follow. And they gave her a really good character arc throughout the movie, deciding that she wants to live and wants to interact with people instead of becoming a stalker like Shrike. And Tom's narration in the book kind of annoyed me, so I was much happier to be seeing the world kind of through Hester's eyes. And they're still very much like, they're this pair of main characters, but just having Hester as the protagonist made the story so much more engaging. Though I will say they did the thing that Hollywood always does, where in the book she was horribly disfigured and had this terrible scar and everyone shuddered to look at her. And then they adapted it into a movie and kept all those reactions. Everyone shudders and is horrified that Tom would be seen with her and makes jokes about how, oh, I know you'd never date her, you can do so much better. But in the movie, she has a dainty, cute little scar that's all cute and feminine, and she can cover it with her hair. And whenever she's being admired by someone, they show her from the side of the face without the scar, because, that teeny tiny little scar just disfigures her so much. And this gorgeous person with the teeny tiny little scar is now a hideous monster. And so that's a very Hollywood thing to do, and that was probably my least favorite change they made. I did think it was interesting that the movie introduced the idea that Valentine was Hester's father. I don't know if this happened in the books or not. I only read the first book, and that could have been material that came out in the second one. But I didn't pick up on that at all in the book, and so I didn't pick up on it when I was watching the movie because I was expecting it to be like the book. And the people I saw the movie with had not read the books, and right away they're like, oh yeah, I bet Valentine is her father. But I did not get that idea from the books, and I'm trying to remember. I feel like it might have talked about Hester's mother and father, or it could have just implied that. I'm not sure. I read the book several months ago, and I've kind of forgotten parts of it now. So I'm not sure if that was a possibility in the books and they just hit it better, or if it's something they changed for the movie. I did think Valentine was a much more villainous villain in the movie. In the books, he was kind of weird. He wavered from being pure evil to being just a confused guy who didn't know it wasn't okay to go around killing people. And so they did a much better job of just making him a clean-cut villain in the movie. I also really liked it that in the movie, Anna Fang had been looking for Hester, and the reason that she saved Hester and Tom is because she needed Hester and had been looking out for her already. In the books, Anna Fang just saved them because she had been a slave once and didn't want anyone else to be a slave, and they seemed like nice people, and she might as well help them. And just based on how harsh and cruel this world is, it seems strange that you just be like randomly helping people out of the goodness of your heart. And it seemed much more plausible to me in the movie that she would be specifically looking for Hester. I also liked it that the movie pushed back Anna Fang's death. It made her death matter more, and it made her more of a real character. It also helped streamlining the plot. The book felt very episodic, and like Tom and Hester were going on an adventure here, and then they were going on an adventure there, and oh, this is the spot where they met Anna, but she's dead now, so now they'll go over here and do this adventure. And the movie streamlined that so much. They cut out the whole thing with the pirates, which was sort of ridiculous, because everybody in this world is basically a pirate, and saying there are some people who attack other people and steal their stuff, and they're pirates, they're worse than all the other people in this world who attack you and steal your stuff. That seemed kind of ridiculous. So just cutting out those pirates made the world make more sense, and it made the plot feel more streamlined and like there was an overall story arc instead of just a bunch of little adventures. I also loved how the movie handled Shrike. In the book, he was my favorite character, and he was actually one of a bunch of different stalkers, and he was just one that happened to be obsessed with Hester, but the government had been experimenting and bringing back a lot of stalkers, and he wasn't the only one. But he was still like the most sympathetic character to me in the book, and I must not be the only one who thought so, because the movie made him so much more sympathetic and made him they took advantage of all of his good points and really brought out his relationship with Hester, and I just love that so much. And an interesting thing that they did not change is that in both the book and the movie, Shrike appears to die, but he does so in a fairly indefinite way that means they could bring him back later if they wanted to. So I thought the initial setup of the characters was much better in the movie too. I liked it that Tom and Catherine already knew each other and that he was helping her with research and stuff. And so that way we got to skip the whole thing where Tom just worships the ground she walks upon. We also skipped his whole hero worship thing with Valentine. He knew and respected Valentine, but he didn't just adore him like he did in the books. And Catherine also seemed like a much more assertive, observant, and intelligent character than she was in the books. In the book, she just kind of went along with things, and it took her a while to figure out that her dad was up to some kind of shady stuff. And so I liked it in the movie that she was much more skeptical and kind of questioned things more and did a lot of her own investigating. Though I did think her clothing was strange, because this whole world was basically a steampunk world. It was, you know, people were fairly poor, but if they were wealthy, you would have expected them to kind of still be along like the Victorian steampunk aspect. But she was wearing like a sweater dress, and at one point she was wearing like skinny jeans and stuff that you would expect to see someone wearing today as they walk around a shopping center. And her hair was a very like modern haircut and stuff, and so I didn't understand why everyone else lived in this lovely steampunk world, and then she was just modern and dressed like it was 2018. I did think it was an interesting change that Catherine and Bevis both lived at the end of the book, which, you know, it'll be fun. I liked them in this story, and it'll be fun to see them in the second movie now. And because they lived, it meant that they didn't have to instantly fall in love like they did in the books. In the books, it was, oh, I've known you for a little while and I've barely talked to you, but we're about to die, so we must declare our love for each other first. And in the movies, they lived, so they didn't have to do that. They might be a little flirty, but they don't have to pretend they're suddenly desperately in love with each other. Another big change at the end of the movie as opposed to the book was that it looked like London was pretty much intact. In the book, I got the feeling that basically the whole city blew up and everyone died. And in the movie, you had the city still pretty much fine. And then they had that gorgeous ending where the people of London went down to the people behind the wall, and they were all kind of trying to form an alliance and be peaceful with each other. And it's a really neat setup for later movies to see these people kind of learn to work together and overcome their differences and things like that. So I thought that was a very optimistic ending. And also, Valentine, you know, crashed down into the bottom of this wreck and he'll crawl out mangled and come back to torture people in the other movies. But at the end of the book, you know, he was kind of teamed up with Tom and Hester almost because Catherine had died and that changed him or something. So that'll be a very different dynamic. And I feel like the tone at the end of this movie, setting it up to go into later movies, is very much, we're triumphant and we'll still have to defeat people like Valentine. And the whole tone was much more positive. And that was a good thing. The ending of the book was my favorite part of the book, but that was because I didn't like the characters and I was happy to see their world get blown up. And in the movie, I was much more attached to them, so I was happy to get to see them live. So I liked the endings of both the book and the movie. So I was very impressed with this adaptation. I liked it a lot. It fixed most of the problems I had with the book, and most of the changes I thought really benefited the story and improved it. So I am definitely going to see more movies in this series if they come out. I do not plan on reading any more of the books because I just don't want to be in Tom's head anymore. I didn't like the narration. They're not really for me. But I enjoyed the movie so much, and I think it was an amazing adaptation.